there. And today's talk, we'll be looking at conducting and funding international research or globally focused research, because we have an example of a project that's actually been here, but with a global focus. And so we have 5 doctoral students with us today. So let me go ahead and let each of you just introduce your name, your program, and then I'll come back to you to talk about your projects.
Sure. Hi, my name is Bradley Custer, and I'm a 4th-year PhD candidate in the Higher Adult and Lifelong Education Program.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Morley, and I'm in the Educational Policy PhD program. Do I have to say what year I'm in? It's just like getting towards that.
No.
Okay. I'm in my final year.
You could say I'm in my preferred year.
Final year is good.
Yeah, final, that's great.
I'm Pauline Wambu, I'm in 3rd year Education Policy.
Laura Kennedy, I'm a 4th year in the Curriculum, Instruction, and Teacher Education program.
And I'm Rachel. I'm also in Curriculum Instruction and Teacher Education, and I'm a 3rd year.
And I know each of you has done different kinds of internationally focused research in different stages. So, and we are recording this, so we hope to get it up on our website later. So if you know people who couldn't make it today, we'll be able to share it with them. But why doesn't each of you tell us who you are? And we'll start with Ophelia.
Okay, definitely she's not talking quite yet. This is my little one, Ophelia. And I am also in the SITE Curriculum Instruction Teacher Education program in my 2nd year. And I have some teaching experience abroad, and I'm very much interested in continuing research that is possibly abroad. So I'm excited to hear about your experiences.
Like Rebecca, I'm in the SITE program in my 2nd year as well. And, I'm Heather Regnue. And I also have experience teaching abroad and living abroad, and I might possibly also do research in those contexts.
I'm Caitlin Barker. I'm a 1st-year PhD student in the history department, and I'm studying African history, and so I will definitely be hoping to do research abroad.
Oh, cool. We're glad to have somebody come over from one of the other programs. So welcome, everybody. So to start out, I wanted to...
Julie, who's behind you?
Oh, sorry. Duh. Hello. Introduce yourselves.
Hello everyone, my name is Tian Tian. I'm a visiting scholar from Southwestern University, China, and my current interest research is about higher education for students with disabilities.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm also from Southwestern University, China, and I'm in the 2nd year for my master's degree, and my major is curriculum, instruction, and teacher education. And I want to learn some experience from you.
Good afternoon, my name is Li Huan, and you could call me Stella if you like it. I'm majoring in vocational education, but here most called career education. So I want to hear some international experience from you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Our visiting scholars are with us until February, so they are here in the college for about 6 months. Yeah, so I'm glad you could come. Well, thanks again, everybody, for coming. And we'll just sort of run this with a few key questions, but it's a small enough group. Discussion is welcome, I think, at any point, so feel free to ask questions. But to start out, I wanted to ask each of the panelists to share briefly about what kind of globally focused or international research are you currently doing or did you do? So it might be completed, it might be ongoing. So Bradley, I'll start with you.
Sure. All of my research focuses on higher education policies that affect people with criminal histories. So all of you, when you apply to MSU and to other universities, at least in the US where you've applied, you had to check a box usually indicating whether or not you had criminal convictions. So all of my research in the US is about what we do as far as financial aid policies, campus housing policies, and admissions policies. Well, at some point I became aware that we are not the only country in the world that does this. And so I engaged in an international comparative project last year comparing how how U.S. universities handle admissions for people with criminal convictions compared to how the United Kingdom, how universities in the United Kingdom do this. And globally, I think we're the only 2 countries in the world that really do this at all. So that was my one toe in international work, and it was kind of a one and done for now. But I have other ideas for future international projects.
Great, thank you, Melissa.
I
I was a teacher overseas in Malawi for 3 years in the Peace Corps, and that's how I became interested in the work of teaching in Malawi. And my dissertation examines the everyday practices of teachers, primarily at one school in Malawi, and how the meaning that they make of their work is influenced by various international projects that are kind of intervening in the work of teaching. So to study that, I did a 9-month qualitative study, and it involved first selecting a case study school and interviewing the 19 teachers at that school who wanted to participate. And then I did shadowing of 2 focal teachers, following them through their days, and I also did interviews with teachers at 6 other schools around Malawi. So there were those 3 different dimensions to this study, and it happened during the 2016-2017 school year. So that's the project that has consumed my life for a very long time, and I'm writing it up right now. But in addition to doing that, I got to go to Malawi in 2013 to do a short-term research project, and I'd be happy to talk about that too.
Holly?
Hi, for me, I study education policy, especially, and then I'm more interested in inequalities in education, and especially the intersection of urban, rural, and gender, especially like the geographic location and how gender intersects with that, and how is it, because we usually see a lot of inequalities within our country, and is it a problem with policy, is it a problem with implementation, or what is the problem? And so for me, I focus my work in Kenya or as other developing countries, but for now I'm just focused in Kenya. So for me to say I'm doing international work, it depends on where I am.
That's right.
If I'm here, then I'm doing international work. If I'm in Kenya, I'm not. I'm doing domestic work. So that is something else that also makes me like, if somebody asks me, are you doing international work? Then it depends on where I am. And so other than that, I also use secondary data to also analyze these different issues of inequalities, because at times it is very hard to collect primary data and to answer the questions that you want to answer.
And one of the reasons too, we wanted to represent different ways to think about globally focused research, because it may be, we have a number of students that are from other countries in our college who go back to their home country, including our cameraman back there. And so we'll talk more later about, if you're in that position, what are the things you had to think about, and it might be different than somebody who's here and going to a country that's not their home country. So we wanted to represent all different ways that you can think about internationally or globally focused research. And so that's a great point. It's international, but it depends on where you are. So, Laura.
So when I finished my master's in education many, many years ago, I decided I wanted to teach abroad before I taught in the US. And when I went to Korea, I had a really difficult time in the beginning adjusting to the Korean education context, because it's so different than the US context. And I met other foreign teachers along the way who didn't have a background in education and didn't have a background in Korean culture. And they were amazing to me that they could adjust to teaching and adjust to the culture and navigate all of this. And so I've remained close with folks in Korea and decided that for my dissertation I wanted to go back and really watch how this identity of an EFL teacher in Korea develops. When you're new to teaching, you're new to Korea, it's all new, and watch how that happens and work with teachers as they're forming this identity as a teacher. So that's what I've been doing. It's a 2-year project. I've been with the same 10 teachers since before they even started teaching. And now in the 2nd year, we're writing together and doing a collaborative autoethnography to tell the story of what it is to be an EFL teacher in Korea. And so rather than me do the writing alone, we're starting to do this writing together. And so it's a project that I'm running back and forth between Korea all the time, because I have to be here, but they have to be there, and we have to navigate that space. So that's why I need a lot of funding to do this project. Those airline tickets are not cheap. So I think that's why I'm here today.
Great, thank you, Laura. Rachel?
Similar to some other folks on the panel, I'm a US American who taught abroad, and that eventually led to my current research interests. I taught secondary school and then also taught some student teachers in Cameroon. And as a result of that, I got really interested in something I later learned were called contract teacher policies. And that's when the way teachers get hired and trained sort of transitions from a long-term career model, like a civil service model, into a short-term contract employment model. And so right now my research focuses on how initial teacher education, so teacher prep programs, have changed as those employment conditions have changed over time. Although I taught in Cameroon for a number of both logistical and reasons and things that were related to my specific topic, my current research is in Senegal. And so this past summer, I was in Dakar making a lot of initial contacts, because as a third year, I'm in a different spot than some other people are in terms of their research. So what I did this summer was really sort of the initial phase of what will hopefully turn into my dissertation.
Great, so it sounds like 3 of you then, it's all heading towards dissertation. Yours might be maybe, or, and then Bradley did a project sort of putting his toe in the international and comparative waters, but it's not leading to the dissertation. So we have different examples of kinds of projects too. Talk a little bit, each of you, and you can jump in, whoever, we don't have to go down the row, but, and some of you shared this already, but how you got, a little more about how you got involved in this particular research.
I think for me, one, it didn't start out as my dissertation. It started out as a summer research fellowship application for what I thought would be a practicum, and it's just grown. But in terms of getting connected, it was a matter of reaching out to connections I had back in Korea to see whether they were interested or if they knew someone who might be interested. And so it was a matter of first emails and then some actual phone calls to connect with folks. But I met my participants for the first time after they'd already agreed to join the project. It was all through emails because we were split across countries.
Anybody else, anything that you hadn't shared already in your introduction about how you got involved in this?
Yeah. For me, I didn't mention, but it's just the fact that I grew up in the country, and I was trained as a teacher. I taught in my school for like 2 or 3 years. And I grew up in a rural area, and so just that experience of seeing the different inequalities and the differences in maybe in terms of infrastructure, the number of teachers, and different resources that different schools within the country have. So that's what made me like to ask like why, although we are like in the same public, we are all in public schools, just like to ask like why are we having all these differences? So although I could ask before I came to MSc, so when I came over, I came for public policy, but now when I applied for PhD in education policy, then I said maybe I can look deeper into these issues and see if I can understand or answer my question, maybe to myself, and also look at what others have done, and yes, to see what this leads to. And so I've done, other than that, and you mentioned whether it might lead to dissertation or not. Maybe not, maybe yes, because like every time I do something, then it's like, because now I'm in my 3rd year, so although I'm streamlining, it's not like specific thing that I did in my first year summer research, but it's just like when I go into that, I've been able to like expand my ideas and see maybe this one has been answered, and also to get other ideas that I could also explore. And like Rachel mentioned, also to get those contacts, because although I grew up in the country, but there's so many people or so many contacts that I don't have. So just being in the country and growing and having that experience gave me some ideas of questions that I can explore.
So multiple purposes in being involved in this research. Anyone, anything else to add on that?
I can add to some of the reasons of, why my research is where it is geographically at this point in time, because depending on what you're interested in, it might come up for you as well. But the theme of what I'm interested in, the working conditions and initial teacher education of teachers has stayed the same. But for a number of reasons, it didn't really make sense for me to do that work where I used to teach in Cameroon. That if you follow international news, you might know some of the reasons why that's not a great place to do educational research right now. Education is a very hot topic, and there's a lot of security issues around that. And so then I thought, oh, well, I'll do research in Mali, which is the place that I've also lived and worked before. Because, you know, again, this is contract teachers is a policy that has traveled and changed and been picked up by people in different countries. But then there's another set of security questions that people who give money for, specifically for US Americans, have about Mali. And then because of some of the issues around what's going on in the country, a lot of things within the education system are very much in flux and are changing. And because of some of the questions I had asked, like Colleen said, like one research thing falls into it, brings to it. So I knew that sort of the genesis of this particular policy was in Senegal, even though it was a place I had not been before this summer. The summer was the first time I had been there, but I knew that that was sort of where this policy started and was then, you know, picked up and put into place by other countries. So that's how I ended up focusing my work on Senegal. And so it's a thing that I don't think I would suggest that trajectory to anyone. But you know, if your interest is really in sort of a theme or an idea, it is, there are ways to follow that when logistical reasons make it so you are not able to do it, depending on what that theme is. For me, it's something that is a transnational trend, and so I was able to do that. But it also means I've had to reframe some of my work and really do a lot of contextual knowledge building, language classes, things like that.
That kind of leads into the next question, which is challenges. So in all these different contexts, I'm imagining you've encountered a number of different challenges in both setting up the research and then in actually carrying it out. And it would be interesting to hear some of the challenges from these different types of projects. So anybody want to start out sharing about the various challenges in getting it going in the first place, as well as actually doing the research?
So my paper is comparative, which requires comparing, in this case, the US to other countries. And when I first designed the project, I was ambitious. I thought I would compare US university admissions policies to those in the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. So I cast a wide net first. I knew a little bit more about what was going on in the United Kingdom, but not so much in Canada and Australia, but I thought it must be similar. That was the question. Way too big of a net. So I spent a couple months kind of putting out feelers, collecting kind of what I could, and I quickly realized that it was just way too much to try to compare these huge policy contexts. So I narrowed it down to a two-country comparison. And that was enough to try to get your head around, because one of the challenges is if you don't know that other country's context, if you're not from there, you have to spend a lot of time to understand more about that country than just that one particular topic, so admissions policies or K-12 policies or whatever. Anybody in comparative research can take two things and compare them to one another. What good, though, is that if you don't know where this thing came from? You can describe it, you can see it, you can pull it off the internet and say, I have this policy, I'm going to compare it to this one. But if you don't understand the context where this came from, it's not going to be a good comparison. So if you engage in this work, or if it's a single study country work and you're jumping into a new country, you have to learn terms. So for example, you all know that in your context there are a lot of terms. We have a lot of jargon in our fields. And in something like university admissions, we use words like undergraduate and graduate, and we have application terms. Those may or may not be the same in the country where you're going. So if you are, say, emailing someone and you're trying to do search terms, you're looking up things in search engines, and you're using US terms, you're not going to get the stuff that you think you're not going to get what may be out there. So one of the challenges really just learning as much as you can about the kind of broader country context, learning some of those terms, so that when you're jumping in, you have some confidence that you're you're actually, comparing what you're supposed to, and you are, you're getting the kinds of information from search engines and things like that you want to be getting.
Good point, I ran into that problem just doing research in this country. Looking at graduate education, but I was looking at health professions, and it turns out MD and dental programs call their students undergraduates, even though they're actually post-bachelor's degree, and I had no idea, so my email going out to participants kind of misfired from the get-go because of that. So it can have, that's a really good point, terms and what you're talking about and how you're defining things and others related to that or other challenges.
So for me, one challenge was applying for IRB. Or in MSU, it was easier because it was straightforward and I had really people to talk to. But then I had also to apply. That was in my first year summer. I had to apply for IRB in Kenya, and then applying it from here when everything is like in the country. Although I'm supposed to do online, but then there's some fee that I'm supposed to pay, which should be done in the bank, and then you get the bank receipt, and then you attach that when you are submitting the proposal for the IRB. So one thing that helped me was my contacts and relatives back at home, so I sent the money, and then they did everything for me and sent me the receipts, and then I was able to attach. And other than that, again, it took a little longer than I thought, because like I expected maybe for it to be ready by the time I started my work at the end of May, but it wasn't ready. So that one was like, it made me like to push my work further than I had initially planned. And then another challenge that I faced was just, mainly after collecting the data, was just time challenges and taking 9 credits. So, and I planned to maybe analyze this data and at least have a feel of what my findings are saying, quote unquote. But having the full class load was a big challenge to have time also to look into this data, and even up to now not finalized looking into it a year after.
So that could be a real challenge for those that apply for summer research funds, and then you want to do something with it and come back and you're thrown back into your normal.
Yes.
Yeah, I would build off of that and say that my biggest challenge has been trying to be a student at MSU and work for MSU, but also maintain those relationships with the teachers in Korea that I'm working with, because it is a 2-year project. And when I'm in Korea, it's easy to focus on the teachers and spend time with them, but I have to remember to zoom in for classes, or I have to remember to like zoom into a meeting or get an email back. And I have to remember my MSU side, but then when I'm at MSU, I have to remember the same thing and keep in touch with the teachers, make sure I'm talking to them each week and not forgetting or letting that slide off the list of things to do. And so trying to be in both spaces mentally, it's really exhausting, and logistically the time change kills me because it's a 14-hour time difference. And so like when I zoom into class in a couple weeks, it's gonna be 6 a.m. I have to be into class. But that's just what it is. And
That's 4 p.m. here.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here, it's 6 a.m. in Korea, but I have to do that. That's how I get permission to travel, is that I have to fulfill my obligations. And so trying to remember obligations at both and being present in both takes time and energy.
Yeah, I think just to build on all that, I also had some unexpected time delays with IRB approval because the process changed. I thought I was on top of everything. I thought I was on the timeline, and then the country I was in changed the process, and it was fine and it worked out. But I think one thing I've learned is that I don't know if it's me or if it's what grad students do in general, is I tend to set very high expectations for what I'll accomplish. And when you're doing sort of place-based research that is not at MSU, I've had to learn how to be more adaptable with what I'm able to do. For a number of reasons, I wasn't able to complete all of the research I had hoped to do this summer. Part of that had to do with an employment strike among the teacher educators that at one of the institutions that I was connected with. And so obviously that is much more important and bigger and than my little summer research project. And so adapting to that and thinking through, you know, here's what I set out to do. Now that I'm physically in this place, what am I able to physically do in this place that I'm not able to do at MSU, and how can I balance that time? Because for those of us who, you know, it's important for us to physically be in another place to do some research. I've had to learn to get creative about how to use my time to make things happen, even when some logistical challenges are there too.
Other challenges?
Yeah, it's interesting that both Rachel and Pauline mentioned the IRB, because for me in Malawi it was also a challenge that I did not anticipate. I thought that IRB, you know, there would be a straightforward application process. MSU makes it so easy, and in Malawi they were reworking the IRB while I was there, or right before I was going. And there's a separate IRB for medical studies, and then the social educational IRB is a separate thing, and that was under reform. And so I had a partnership with this institution affiliated with the University of Malawi, and they were able to grant me, you know, kind of approval for my study based on my affiliation with them, because their studies were approved in the, you know, reworking system landscape. But that really stressed me out when I was going over there and thinking, all I have is an email from this guy saying that my research is approved, and there's no way for me to get a more, you know, authoritative, or like, you know, something with a heading or something that just makes me feel like I can actually do the work that I've proposed and, you know, planned out. So that was one thing, and also the visa process was changing too, and it changed on the very day that my family and I arrived in Malawi. So leading up to the trip, we were planning on we bought this like single entry visa. We paid, it was $800 for our entire family, and in the past there hasn't been a cost associated with it. The day that we arrived, there was no longer a cost associated with it, but because we were prepared ahead of time, and I did all of the research and had all of my spreadsheets to make sure I had things ready, we ended up just having to eat that cost. And I talked to the U.S. Embassy in Malawi, and they said, you know, that had happened to a number of people, but that was just, I was talking with Julie about this a couple weeks ago, and she said, you know, that's an unexpected, those things happen, and that could happen with IRB too, if there are some, like I know in Tanzania, there's a pretty sizable fee that researchers pay, and, you know, that could change, but that's just something to factor into budget timeline, to your budget projections.
Sounds like being prepared for the unexpected, and being able to kind of readjust, even if it was based in the U.S., because you had certain expectations for what the project would be, but then you have to adjust that. I think that's true with any research, but it probably takes on even greater importance when you're trying to do any sort of research that takes you out of the country to another country, or comparative research. So anything else on challenges to highlight?
Yeah, maybe I can add that there are times when I was doing the work, I felt like an outsider inside my own country, because I felt like I knew how things were working, or when I went to an office, I didn't know whether to say I'm a Kenyan or to say I'm a student at MSc, like what comes first.
Yeah.
That was a challenge, but there are times when I said, I'm doing my PhD in the US, I got a better reception than when I said, oh, I'm so and so, I'm a Kenyan. So it just, at times I felt torn, like, what should I say? Whom should I explain myself to be? But when I wanted things to work fast, I would just say, and then I had my cards, which had a PhD student at MSU. So at times, because like when you're coming from a developing country and somebody hears about United States, they feel like they view you differently. So I used that as an advantage at times, but at times I was told like, what should I do first?
That raises an interesting question, you know, what does that look like for U.S. students who go to that country to do research and the reception, and, you know, how is that different? Or like in your case, going back to your your home country? That's an interesting question. Kind of brings up your own identity
That's true.
into the mix, which I'm sure you all experience things around that too. So, but let's talk about resources. So, not financial resources yet. We'll talk about that in the next question. But what kinds of resources and tools did all of you use or find valuable as you developed and carried out the research? So, resources could be anything, other people, but that were helpful to you in getting this research off the ground and then in actually conducting it. Resources, tools.
So I used a data collection tool to get around IRB. I mean, my research was not with people, it was really about policies and policy data, I guess. So I used the Freedom of Information Act, which in the US is a state-based law. Every state has their own public records laws that are a little bit different. And fortunately, the United Kingdom has a Freedom of Information Act too, which is quite similar to the laws that we have here. The basic premise is that anybody, you don't have to be a citizen of that country or that state, or that jurisdiction, can submit requests to publicly funded entities like government agencies, public universities, public schools, and so long as the records that you're requesting fall within the jurisdiction of that law, they have to provide it to you within a certain period of time. So I tried that. That data then is public data. It's not identifiable student data. Not if you're researching teachers, it wouldn't be identifiable, employment data. But so anyway, so that's why you don't need an IRB for it. So this proved to be quite useful. Now I got advice not to do this because there is a perception that it is a bit underhanded, that you're exploiting a public records law to get data. I say FUI. I've done it in 2 different studies. It works really well. The notion is that, yeah, FUI. Use it. It's useful. The idea, people said, a lot of people send in Freedom of Information requests and they don't like it when you do it. Too bad. That's the law. It exists so that people from the public, whether you're a researcher or a private citizen, can access these data. Every university, at least in the United Kingdom, and most universities like at MSU have full-time staff dedicated to fulfilling these requests. So anyway, so it worked out well. What happens though is some schools, some places you have to follow up on. They don't respond to your requests. There were a couple universities who never responded to my request, which is a violation of the law. I didn't file complaints. In Michigan, you have to go to court to get someone to file, to fulfill a request if they don't do it. It was not worth it for this project, but that is a problem. Sometimes the universities or the public entities don't fulfill those requests. But going back to this issue of language, it's really important. It's a